We're going to install Windows Server 2016 with Hyper-V Tech Preview. We're going to go with the GUI. How you doing, Dan?
Very good, sir. How are you?
Good. You sound great. And we'll get started with something that you recently went through. I understand you're about to publish a full soup to nuts video of how to install and configure Hyper-V. Is that audience on Channel 9 going to be for the kind of newbie or someone who hasn't used it for years, or?
It's mostly going to be for the new person that just doesn't know anything about installing it. And there are some minor changes between 2012 and 2016. And I also talk a little bit more in depth about the networking, because that's one of the things that people often get stumped up on a little bit.
Okay, good. And that's exactly what I wanted to ask you about, because it's been a little while since I've installed it in my home lab. You and I are speaking together in Boston, or Cambridge, later this week.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, yep. And that's coming up this Thursday night, Virtue. Now, the topic looks like you'll be talking about 2016. Is that the video you're publishing on Tech Preview 5 on 2016, your Hyper-V video that you just produced, or is it 2012?
It's 2016, TP5. Yep.
Awesome. Great. All right. So today, what's the bit of a twist on that will be here. So in this home lab, which is a Supermicro SuperServer, so pretty much all Supermicro products for many years have had IPMI, or also known as BMC, Baseboard Management Controller. What it is a fifth network port in this little system that allows us full out-of-band access to doing things like not using a keyboard or VGA cable or mouse ever for the server. Just plug in a Cat5e or later cable for your 1 gig connection. You have full management, including mounting the ISO and installing Windows Server even quickly over the ISO. So there's really no need for DVDs for years now, and there's really no need to even do anything with the ISO other than mount it with a Java applet I'm going to show you. That's soon going to be an HTML5 interface, even better than using Java for that stuff. So this is the system, and Dan, this is what I'll actually be bringing to the user group meeting this Thursday, and 128 gig of RAM, and I've got one SSD on there, and it's a fast one, so it's going to be NVMe storage. Let me show you the desktop. Let's start at the top right. We're burning all of 36 watts as it's idling here, running Windows 10. I'm going to reboot off the ISO, and we're going to kick off the Windows Server 2016 install, booting from the ISO, and reinstall right to the same NVMe drive we're on. So if I run Samsung Magician, you'll get a quick look that we're talking about the fastest storage here. That's 4.5 times faster than any normal SSD, and this is NVMe storage. Now, Server 2016 has a built-in driver, and then we can replace it with a faster driver from Samsung if time permits. But it'll bootstrap, it'll find itself. Any recent vintage OS from the last 3 years or so boots fine from NVMe, and I've tried it with many different OSs. So right there you see we're on a Samsung 950. So that's where we're going to install. So we're going to need to nuke my partitions. So you can see we're efficient here, 36 watts. I just did a full backup so I can restore the whole thing. And if we look at our networking, that's also kind of interesting, because that's a lot of network ports. And 2 of them are 10 gig. Now, right now, I have them hooked up to a 1 gig switch in case we use them. Now, Dan, just a network overview from your side. Yeah, I mean, this is, kind of overpowered here. You see we get 4 Ethernet ports. We got 2 Intel i350s, which come up right by default with Windows Server 2016. The driver's there. In Tech Preview 4 that I last tried, the 10 gig did not come up. I had to manually download those drivers, and that's also an Intel called an X552. What do you think we're going to use today, Dan? Just this one bottom left port, each 0, and leave it at that for simplicity? Or do you want to do 2 network ports today? They're all wired up.
Yeah, I would just use one for now to make it simple. But Paul, I have a bit of a problem, and that is I can't see your screen, so I'm flying blind.
Okay.
All I see is a gray kind of background, and that's it.
Okay, I'll restart screen sharing here on Skype. Let's figure out what's going on with that. You with me now or no?
Still just a gray screen.
Okay, I'll have to stop it and start it again.
Now I have your picture. Okay, now I have your desktop.
Okay, good.
And I did have your desktop before because you were on your website. You were here.
Okay, we're back.
Like gray. Okay.
All right, so all I was saying was, yeah, we have 4 Ethernet ports all wired up. The 5th one is for management only, and let's bring that up. So we're done showing you a brief overview of the hardware in Windows 10. And just one last tool here, that if we have a GUI Windows, we can actually see temperatures of all the components in the motherboard and so forth. But of course, this runs many different OSs. So let's go ahead and shut this thing down. And because I'm using this out-of-band management, it's as if I had a VGA cable and was recording everything that's outputting from the server, because that's exactly what you're seeing over this iKVM viewer Supermicro application here. It's basically launched from a browser.
Awesome.
So going forward, Edge browser or any browser, Dan, will work fine with HTML5. That'll be really nice to kind of dump the whole Java thing and just let any old browser on any old PC run just fine, even a lightweight PC, or heck, even the original Surface, running on an alternate CPU universe. So that'll be good, getting rid of Java. Now, the machine takes a little while to boot. You'll see the IPMI address. So basically, I just pointed my browser to that IP address, and that prevents me from ever needing a local keyboard or monitor or mouse from this machine that's running in my home lab right now. Okay, so now that the boot is finishing, I'm going to go ahead and hit F11 for alternate boot sequence. And I'm also going to show you on virtual storage, I need to plug in an ISO file. So the ISO file I'm going to do is in my ISOs folder, and it's this crazy long name. That's Server 2016 Tech Preview 5. Click Open, click Plugin. That's the terminology Supermicro uses. And, okay, looks like I missed the boot, but that's okay. We've now mounted a virtual CD-ROM. It's going to mount that ISO and think it has a CD-ROM kind of emulated. Yes, Dan, you had a question?
Well, again, I'm not seeing your screen. What I'm seeing is a desktop and your Java iKVM viewer, and I'm not seeing the machine actually boot.
Okay.
I'm not sure if I'm supposed to. I'm guessing I am.
Yeah, I know you are. That's so. Skype is sharing out the desktop.
Now I have the gray screen again.
Yep.
Just a blank gray screen.
Thinking, why is Skype doing this to me? I'm sharing out the whole desktop, not just one window. So let me stop it again and see if we can get it going. So did it just stop abruptly when I started up a remote session? And then
Well, I think so, because it had the it had the KVM thing with all of the speedometers listed, and then it just kind of froze there.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to go with Skype's share a window feature instead and see if I do better with that. Because obviously it's somehow when I do a full screen RDP session, you're losing out. So let me set that up. Okay, Skype only likes to share what's on the window it's running on. So I'm working on fixing that now. Okay, seeing that?
I see your screen and the Java iKVM.
Great, that's what we're supposed to see. All right. Sorry about that hiccup, so now I'm going to reboot off the virtual CD-ROM now that we're together. And you're seeing it saying restarting, right? Windows 10?
Correct.
All right, so the server with 128 gig of RAM and a Xeon D processor with 8 cores is now rebooting again, and this time we've got it on video. Dan, one other thing about the BIOS. I don't want to look like there's any smoke and mirrors here. The machines tend to default to dual mode these days. So they'll try to do legacy mode. They'll try to do UEFI mode. I find there's a lot less trouble when I'm multi-booting with other OSs and Linux and Hyper-V and Windows 10. It's just go UEFI. Not secure boot, because that definitely complicates things when you're trying to multi-boot. But if you're trying to just do what I'm doing today, for instance, a modern OS where, heck, I might be beyond 2 terabytes on the C drive someday, I just want to keep it working, and UEFI is good at that. It also keeps the boot sequence a little simpler, where when I hit F11 right now to select my boot device, fewer devices show. You don't get like a UEFI and a non-UEFI version of a USB stick and all that kind of stuff, confusing matters a bit.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I'm a fan of the UEFI as well.
Yep, it was a kind of a painful transition, but I think we're finally mature enough. 2 or 3 years ago it was rougher. Okay, so back to the video on the desktop, you'll see a virtual CD-ROM. That's the mounted ISO that I did, right? And now I hit the space bar on my keyboard. It said, push any key to boot. And now it's booting Server 2016 installation. So it's that simple to kick off. How is that different than other systems? Well, if you're used to HPILO or something else, yeah, it's a little different what key you hit when you boot the machine, and it's a little different how you're going to mount media. But again, this is a world where we just skip having a DVD spinning in a server because who really needs that anymore for much of anything? Once this comes up, naturally it looks pretty much like any Windows install. We're going to go with the GUI, Dan, right? Not the okay.
Yes, I recommend it.
Okay.
Unless for performance reasons you don't want a GUI, it's it's a lot easier from a management standpoint. Although one of the things that I think we'll find in the very near future is we're going to get, particularly with 2016, we're going to get much heavier into remote management where the GUI really won't be needed. And in fact, as we introduce nano server and containers and other technologies, that's going to be even more important.
Okay, thanks, Dan. So yeah, for an audience where people might be used to another hypervisor and they're trying this for the first time, yeah, we're trying to keep the video kind of as simple as possible to get your feet wet or get started with Hyper-V. And in this machine, since I've already installed 2016 and saw how ridiculous easy it was, all you and I are doing is enable the Hyper-V role that I didn't get around to yet.
Well, Paul, to enable you don't have to go through the installation here to enable the Hyper-V role. Sorry, I thought you were installing Windows.
No, I am. I still want to install 2016. I want to nuke Windows 10 for sure. So I'm going to hit next.
Okay, got it. Yep. Next.
All right. In the next screen, for partitioning drives, I'm going to nuke all the stuff it finds and just totally obliterate Windows 10. And we're going to get that question soon here. For the Tech Preview 5, do I need to do a key?
Nope, you can I don't have a product key, that's fine.
Excellent. All right,
and then select the third one down, the fourth one down is data center with the desktop experience. So yeah, if you want to do standard, it would be the second one down.
Okay, we'll go with data center. I've hit next, and now it should be sniffing out after the EULA. Should be sniffing out.
Forgot to read it, Paul.
Custom, yep. Okay, here we go. Now notice, I'm going to slide my mouse over. There we go. It's all drive 0. Remember I said I left only one drive attached to keep this video simple? This is one Samsung 950 screaming fast SSD we have to keep, again, to make it simpler. But if you have multiple drives or multiple OSs and you're dual booting, you want to be very careful here.
Very careful.
Exactly. Yep. If you're new to this, I would recommend removing other drives.
Including USB drives. All drives except for the one that you want to install on. Makes it much easier, much safer.
Good points. And Dan, you're a guy who's blogged a lot at itproguru.com about booting from VHDs and so forth, right?
Yep, absolutely.
And so those particulars, disk part and advanced stuff, right? That's great to learn at some point. But again, today we're just getting a basic install started on one drive.
Yep.
All right, so I've nuked all my Windows 10. And now the video is from here forward looking just like if I'd stuck in a naked hard drive, because that's what I've just done to it. I hit next. It's going to continue, and it's going to start laying down files. Now, I will say compared to maybe a USB 3 thumb drive with Windows Server 2016, it'll be slightly slower because we're doing it over the wire with a mounted ISO, but hardly worth, sneaker netting or going back and forth to a server for that. The difference in speed is just not that big a deal these days because even the management ports on new modern servers are gigabyte. They don't even go with 1000. And that actually does matter when you're laying down a large ISO like this. Okay, so let me bring up something here. I bookmarked a few things here while the install's cooking in the background. So IPMI, I mentioned that word before, BMC. So folks that are used to HPILO or the like, there, we'll leave the install going on the left, and we'll have a look at IPMI on the right. That's the only thing that was, kind of skipped over at the beginning of this video. So, for instance, recommended BIOS settings. I had mentioned I turned on UEFI. There's no secrets here. This is exactly what I did from factory default. Turned off numlock, which is annoying. Changed the power button. Changed to UEFI in the BIOS. That's basically it. Everything bolded here. So it's very little change from factory defaults. And again, check with your Dell or HP or whatever other home server gear you might be using, or Supermicro instructions, but the gist would be very similar for anything you bought in like the last 2 or 3 years. If it's more than that and it doesn't even have UEFI, the way we're installing Windows today, it's not really going to matter. The fact that it's UEFI and it's going to be a GPT NTFS file system or older days of MBR and something less than 2 terabytes and the old MBR, still NTFS, but MBR type of drive. It won't matter for anything we're doing today, right, Dan? The user
Correct.
won't really care about any of that. Okay.
Yeah, so the only thing that really will matter, and again, like you said, any recent hardware is going to have it enabled by default or available by default, is the virtualization technology. So as long as your virtualization technology is enabled, you'll be able to deploy and run Hyper-V.
Good point. And this particular motherboard ships with the CPU features and chipset with VTD on. You're right, though. Gamer motherboards and other overclocking kind of systems or repurposed laptops, it often ships with that stuff off. I'm seeing if I can find a screenshot of that. So it just so happens on the Supermicro, you don't have to worry about it. It's virtualization ready for any hypervisor right out of the chute. But still a very good point. And here's actually what I was just talking about, UEFI.
And we went to a gray screen again.
You did, I didn't. Darn,
Okay.
it keeps doing that. All right. It's a good time anyway because we're only 13% through the install. Let me get Skype set up again. I'm going to keep the audio and video going because otherwise they'll get out of sync. I'm recording audio separate from video. I'll have to fix this post-production here. Okay, I'm minimizing my remote desktop. You're seeing a gray screen. Did the gray just go away when I show my desktop again?
Nope.
Nope. Okay.
Still have a gray screen.
All right. I have to stop sharing screens. Bring up remote desktop. Right click. Share screens. Select share window, which seemed to work longer. Had you for 15 minutes that time. And sharing out RDP again. You got a tiny little window.
20%?
I maximize it and it becomes big and you're looking at everything again, right?
Correct.
All right. 21%, all right. Okay, another thing to point out would be, what do they call it? I mentioned an acronym VTD. Dan, you remember off the top of your head some of the other acronyms you look for virtualization ready motherboards? There's a bunch of different words, Intel extensions or Intel virtualization. Or every vendor seems to use different words. ASUS, ASRock, MSI, Gigabyte. I've seen them all. They all use different words.
Yeah, so really what you're looking for, the key thing that you want to look for is virtualization technology, and like you said, could be called any number of different things. But there is another one, I'm trying to think of it, SLAT. If your machine supports SLAT, you'll want to turn that on, which is second layer address translation. You don't need it for Hyper-V, but you do need it if you want to run like remote desktop services and you want to be able to enable some more advanced features. Again, not needed for Hyper-V, but if you're going to be big into virtualization and doing demos and doing some other high-end stuff, you'll want to make sure that you have SLAT capable and that you have that enabled.
Yeah, it brings back a memory of 3 years ago, December 2012, right after Christmas, unboxing this Lenovo IdeaPad, and someone left a comment about SLAT, and it looks like the comment is not there, but here we go. So someone wanted to install Hyper-V on a Lenovo, and they were just kind of curious if it would work. And there it is. Someone's recommending a tool. So here we are 3 years later. I ran MS Info and gave the user this, and it seemed to make him happy and comfortable that Hyper-V was going to work. That doesn't make too much sense. Let's look at what he actually asked. Okay, here's the tool. Core Info-V. What would you use today? This is Mark Rasinovich's tool, Core Info?
That's exactly it. Yep.
Okay, great. So Core Info-V, and it tells you right there. Hypervisors present, support. Okay, so I'm sorry, help me interpret this. So asterisk is a good sign. We'd see nothing there if it didn't support hardware
Correct.
Okay.
So actually,
Yeah, it didn't look so good for that yoga, right? Maybe the dash is normal and the asterisk is a bad sign. I don't quite
well,
remember.
it looks to me like it supports it, but it's been a while since I've used it, so I'm not positive.
No problem. And let's just see where it is on TechNet. Okay, it hasn't been updated since August 2014. Probably really didn't need to be. And let's see if there's output examples. No, I don't see a screenshot at technet.microsoft.com or the Windows System Internals download page. All right. Now on the left, I'll also point out.
So I think what that's referring to is if you have multiple CPUs, then you would have a reference to the CPU. Where you only have one, that's where you're getting like the dash, and the star would be relative to all of them. Would be the way that I would translate that, but I'm not 100% positive.
Okay. Yeah, and I should actually I should have run that on Windows 10 before the reboot, and we would have seen how this machine would look. But I can grab that or grab a screenshot of that at some point because I've been meaning to run SLAT on here anyway. Anyhow, the other thing that's a bottleneck, if we look at the machine that's serving up this ISO right now over Ethernet, and okay. Remember I mentioned the NVMe driver by default in Windows is slow? That is true. With this particular Samsung 950, you do have an NVMe driver that Microsoft has had for years, and it's just kind of pokey until you replace it with the Samsung one. So until we got the OS up, we won't really have the OS, shining or showing off the speed it's actually capable of. And it's dramatic, I believe, when I last tested it. It'll be interesting to see if Tech Preview 5 maybe includes right-click and just say, hey, update, and pull it down from Samsung. That'd be nicer than having to go grab it manually. But for now, for many, many months, all the way through last month when I last worked with the Samsung 950 on a Windows 10 machine, right-clicking and trying to update from Device Manager for NVMe driver from Samsung or 10 gig driver from Intel didn't actually work. A little bit surprising. ZND is really popular and coming out from many different manufacturers. I have a feeling that'll get fixed at some point in the future, and then you won't have to go to any third-party downloads. You'll just get it natively from Windows. Microsoft update. But we'll see. All right. But yes, you can see slightly confusing here because I got my Java iKVM window, but just to clarify, I got Task Manager running on a Windows 10 laptop that's attached with a gigabit wire. And it's a little older laptop with a SATA 2 drive, so that's a little bit of a bottleneck, and it's only pushing at about 40 megabits. I suspect the bottleneck is actually the pokiness of the NVMe it's laying down files onto. Hard to say that for sure, but this SSD, well, it's hard to know from just this look. All right, I'm going to go ahead and pause for a moment here. Just minimize that. We'll leave the install in the window in the middle of the screen. And when that's done, we'll obviously do a reboot, put in NVMe, reboot one more time. Then we're ready for the configure a Hyper-V. So Dan, we get to that point, about how long will that be? So you have Windows built, you got drivers the way you like, and now you're about to do Hyper-V work.
Yeah, the Hyper-V work is super fast. You basically go into add the role. It'll automatically prompt you to add the features as well. And that process will take about a minute. Particularly if you're running on NVMe, probably less than a minute. And then that will force a reboot because what's actually happening whenever you lay down Hyper-V is it inserts that in front of the machine that you're actually running. So the hypervisor layer sits underneath the OS of the host machine. So it does require a reboot, and then you'll reboot it, and then you go back into Server Manager after that, and you'll be able to see that Hyper-V is indeed running. You're ready to go at that point. Then we can actually go ahead and stand up our first virtual machine. Whenever you go through the install, though, it will prompt you. With 2016, it prompts you to, actually with 2012 it did too, it prompts you to configure the network during the installation. And that's really what I recommend that people do. What I've seen is a lot of people, they don't take the defaults and they turn off, or they don't turn on the checkbox to set up the network configuration while you're doing the install. And whenever you do that, then you have to go back in and manually do that. But if you do it during the install, it's so much easier. But I am going to do a video in the course of the next couple of days, kind of an introduction to Hyper-V networking, where I'm going to stand up several virtual machines and connect all the networking and show you how to do bridging and how to do wireless configuration, with the premise that, hey, if I want to create a demo machine that's on a laptop and I want to be able to use wired, or I want to be able to use wireless, and I want to be able to pick between the two, and I want to make sure that different virtual machines are available in different scenarios, you can do all of that stuff with Hyper-V. It's just a matter of understanding how the networking is working under the covers.
Okay, and then I'm pointing to this article. Nice job on the site redesign, and here's some work we did together with a Channel 9 video. So folks are more interested in getting into the weeds a little more about NVMe, more than today's video where I just touch on it. Go ahead and check out this video. Dan, another question. You alluded to networking. How about drives for simplicity? I have another SSD I can attach, so on the next reboot, or now, it'll be visible. Any value to me having another NTFS formattable, SSD out there, or are we going to just keep it simple with one drive for Hyper-V today?
Absolutely, there's value to it. In fact, one of the things that I recommend whenever you're deploying this is you always do it on two drives. One is going to be your operating system drive, and the other is going to be your VM drive. You generally do not want to put your virtual machines, particularly virtual machine hard disks, on your OS drive. So as a best practices, I would go ahead and stand up that second drive as well.
All right. Now, for today's purposes, the VMs will actually shine in their best light if we don't have a lot of workload going from Windows Server itself, if we do use NVMe, where we put our OS.
Sure,
So
no
as Dan
problem.
just
We'll
said,
just make that. Yep, we'll just make that point verbally. That it's
Yep.
best practice to put it on a separate drive.
Okay. So imagine I have a Samsung 850, actually an 840, a little older. I could have stuck Hyper-V on there, and then had the 950 just for the VMs to live on. That would have been maybe a better scenario from a speed perspective. Well,
Correct.
especially if things got busy. Maybe we had SQL Server or other roles on that Windows Server 2016. Well, that's where we really want to keep it separate from where the VMs are going to live, the data store, right?
Correct. Yeah, you're generally, the general rule is on Hyper-V server, you don't want to have any other services running on that. Any other services that you need, you'd put those inside of a VM and have the hypervisor running them.
Fair enough. And we're really more, well, we're doing proof of concept or home lab stuff, maybe people trying to get themselves trained or Microsoft certified in some way. You're right. You're not always going to do it right on a budget in a home lab where you're more trying to get your feet wet. But it's also balancing that with, well, what's best practice that you should be doing in an enterprise. So it sounds like you'd be leaning towards minimum best practice if you're actually planning on going production on this would be probably minimum of 2 NICs and 2 drives. Am I right? Or
Correct.
okay, 2 NICs and 2 drives. And of course 10 gig if you got it.
Yeah,
Especially if you got
absolutely.
it. Yeah.
The more bandwidth, the more network bandwidth you got, the better. The better performance you have on your disk, the better. So.
Yeah, and I'll point out NVMe can actually pump out the data fast enough to actually use the 10 gig. So I've had some videos where I copy ISOs over and over 10 gig. It's just phenomenally quick. It's actually faster to copy from one NVMe drive to another over 10 gig than to copy to the NVMe drive itself because you're balancing. You're reading from one and writing to the other, and they're both balanced and full speed ahead. Whereas if you copy to itself, the drive is both reading and writing at once. So it's a brave new world with 10 gig, and it's actually finally affordable in a home lab because of what Intel has done with that Xeon D. So as I pointed out earlier in the picture and stuff here, it's really not so much about just what Supermicro has done. There's many competitors shipping a motherboard like this, which is the same 6.7-inch square, tiny form factor, somewhere between 30 and 80 watts, depending on how many cores you pick, and before you add drives. So very efficient. And part of the nice piece is having the 10 gig built right in, I'm finding I'm burning less watts. I've actually experimented with PCI add-in cards. It's just really nice to have a system on a chip, everything on the motherboard. The whole solution is what's burning. What you saw, 38 watts in the beginning of this video, right, when Windows 10 was idling. It's kind of amazing, and that was with all 4 Ethernet interfaces lit up. So on the left, it's almost done. It's going to reboot shortly. After I get that Samsung NVMe driver in there, it'll be ridiculously quick. One thing that won't speed up is the 1-minute boot time. That's typical on servers. $30,000 servers I worked on, they typically could be 2, 3, 4 minutes, especially in the early UEFI days. So yeah, that's one thing about servers versus, say, a game or workstation. You are looking at a longer boot time in general.
Yep.
That's just the way it is. But 1 minute's not so bad. Here it goes. It's rebooting. This particular machine has a speaker added, so you're not going to hear it on this video because it's a little far from me, but helpful because you have to kind of pay attention. If you're trying to hit alternate boot sequence, that's when you want to pay attention. So am I okay with ejecting the ISO at this point or a little too early? Too early,
No,
right?
absolutely. No, you go ahead and eject it at this point
Okay.
for sure. And that'll keep it from booting back to the ISO. Also, Paul, I want to just a comment that I've lost your video again.
Okay, hang on. Fix it up yet again. Before I do that, I don't want to miss hitting F11. So I'm going to make sure we get booted into this new drive we just laid down. Now, if Hyper-V is going to be my OS of choice, instead of hitting F11 and choosing boot for this one sequence that Dan, unfortunately, you can't see at the moment, but just bear with me a few more seconds. I want to permanently go in the BIOS and say, okay, wherever you find this Windows instance, it'll show something like Windows. It'll see that Windows is installed somewhere. Let's put that in the top of the boot order so I don't have to hit any keys when I boot. So I'm hitting delete to get into the BIOS. Then I'm fixing video for Dan here. Just make sure I get in the BIOS. There we go. I'm in the BIOS. Okay, you're back.
Got it.
So we go over to the boot sequence, and there it is right on top. Turns out I didn't have to do anything. As Dan said, once I ejected the UEFI A10 CD-ROM that was kind of faking a CD-ROM, it would have just booted off of Windows by default. So I've made no changes to the BIOS. It's right at the top of the list. UEFI hard disk Windows. So like Dan said, it just tends to be easier when you turn on UEFI. All this stuff just works. So I'm going to discard changes in the BIOS because I didn't make any. Hit exit, and it should just boot Windows 2016 right up.
Correct.
We're going to see a little swirly pinwheel. And there it is. A little bit of a bug in the BIOS that it doesn't erase this. It should actually have blanked out the screen. Just something I've noticed on this particular.
Oh, that's marketing. They want that out there as long as possible.
Yeah. And you can actually put a quiet mode in the Supermicro BIOS and kind of tell it to go away with its little GUI there. Okay, there we go. Getting devices ready. This is all typical Windows stuff. Looks very much like if you've done Windows 10 yourself before. I'm going to ask a question because I haven't Googled this for a month or two. Is there any hints or time frames or what quarter this thing will ship, Dan, or is it too early to ask that? Or 2016, sorry.
I don't know.
Okay.
If I had to guess, I would say Q3, but I don't have anything that I can share in terms of a date.
Sorry to blindside you with that, but you're going to get asked that at the user group Thursday. Anyway.
Yeah, no, I get asked that all the time,
Yep.
and I just refer people to the Windows Server blog, and when Ignite comes about, I would assume that it's going to release somewhere around Ignite time frame. So I don't know if it's going to be before or shortly after, but whenever there's a major event, that's usually when Microsoft does a lot of their announcements, if you will.
Okay, just looking up a date. There it is, September 26th in Atlanta for Ignite. And you mentioned Windows Server blog.
Yep, that's it.
Blogs.technet.microsoft.
Yep.
And that'd be a good place to get the official word on the announcement from
Correct.
product managers and so forth. All right, so on the left you're seeing the spinning pinwheel again. Just a normal thing. It installs. There we go. That was pretty quick already even without the driver. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and set up a password. Hitting enter, which hit the finish button for me. I didn't even need the mouse there.
Yeah, while that's running, Paul, let me just highlight a couple more things.
Sure.
One of the things that you're going to want to do, first off, we don't necessarily need to do that for the purpose of this video, but I would strongly recommend that everybody create your own administrative user and log in with that, and not use administrator for really anything other than just getting the operating system up and running the very first time. Some things it won't let you do unless if you're logged in as administrator. But as a best practice, you really don't want to use that administrator account at all. In fact, what I recommend a lot of people do is just disable it completely. Once you get your official administrative user set up and running, then you can deactivate or disable the administrator user.
Okay, so in this initial setup phase, getting the Hyper-V roll and getting the networking square and making a first VM or something, maybe they're okay, but by the end of this, I would really want to do what you just said.
Correct.
Okay, we can tackle that. That won't take very long to do. So in this phase, I've actually installed Windows Home Server quite a bit in the past, and basically that seems to piggyback off of this. It kind of runs another script and I think does an extra reboot. And nowadays, and nowadays I think a third reboot, and I think they've added it's basically just a role you can add. So whether you install it up front because you chose the 2016 Server Essentials, or you get it later, it doesn't really matter. It basically just seems to run scripts and kind of transmogrify, morph, change the machine into that other role.
Correct.
Yep. Okay. And then right now it's doing whatever it's doing, to finalize settings under the cover. So I can't remember what the last tech preview said. It's been several months since I tried. I don't even think you guys ask time zone. I mean, you streamline the process even on Windows 10 so much. There's so few questions. Probably all that's left is...
I don't think there's anything. I don't think it asks you anything else. I think it just drops you at the desktop with Server Manager already running. So then from Server Manager, we're going to go to the Manage menu and add remove features. Or actually, it's right on the dashboard of the Server Manager. You can just click right there and say add features, add roles or features.
So here's a question. This was internet attached, so it can find the internet. If it wanted to right now pull down from Microsoft some sort of newness under the covers, it would, I suppose. We don't really know what it's doing under the covers, but would you recommend leaving cables attached? Because right now I'm about to get Windows Update real busy on us. I might actually want to pull those 4 cables before we continue.
It's up to you. I tend to leave it, but
Okay.
I don't know at what point it's going to go out and do updates. I do know it does them dynamically, though.
Okay, so I'm going to focus on what I'm looking at here. We're going to click on Macro and hit the Control-Alt-Delete, right? That's a special key we're passing through to this iKVM viewer. And now I'm typing in the password. And I'm just going to leave the cables attached. I'm also curious about how it handles 10 gigs, so why not let it show us that. Here we go, our first time. Not sure what time zone it's chosen, but okay, there we go. We got our desktop. So Dan, I'm going to look at Device Manager, and before I go fiddling with the NVMe driver, I want to see what it does by default. Okay, base system devices. It's going to be pulling down the what's the Xeon D chipset stuff. So Intel is getting a little hard to find your chipset drivers. Why? Because they just come from Windows Update these days. So to get rid of a whole bunch of base device gobbledygook in your device manager, it's better to just be patient these days, I found, with my latest builds. Since all
Yeah,
of it
the
comes
system
down.
will perform much better. Plus, you get all the security stuff as well built into the new driver. So it is definitely better to have to go ahead and do those.
Let's see what we got for a driver for the Samsung. Default.
Microsoft, yeah.
Now, I didn't give the system a whole lot of time to do its own updates, but no, it's not going to do that. So let me just quickly, let's see. I'm going to right-click here. I'm going to go to System, Remote Settings, and turn on Remote Desktop. Okay, I'm going to check my network connection. Well, then let me just go to command line. Here we go. What's my IP? And I'm going to drag and drop a file in there to get the NVMe driver going. So 183 is my IP. Let me see if I can RDP right in. That way I don't need to deal with any kind of browsing on the server itself, which you really shouldn't be doing. It's not case sensitive. It never has been. All right. You're watching me connect
Yes.
after turning on RDP, and good, you're still with me and seeing the video. That's good. Now it warned me about firewall rules, but it looks like we are in. Excellent. Now I just need to minimize that and get that NVMe driver in my clipboard. Okay. So if we go to the consumer Samsung page, not enterprise, that's where you will find things like NVMe driver. And they really have changed the website on me, throwing me off a little bit. There it is under drivers. Completely new website. Version 1.1 I've already installed though, so shouldn't be any surprises. Let me get that zip file ready. Smart screen, doing it, there we go. Copy. And now, best practice is not using a browser of any sort on this new Hyper-V destined machine that we just built. All I'm doing is doing a cut and paste through RDP of a single driver file. Because it's a driver file, I think I'm going to want to extract it first. Let's take a look. Nope, actually the installer's running just fine. Just a moment. There we go. This looks very consumery rather than enterprisey, this screen here, but this is just how Samsung's utility looks. Hit next, accept the agreement, install, and one reboot away we'll have better speeds. Okay, I'm going to cheat a little here and might do a home lab to speed things up a little bit. Okay, so Dan's going to reboot us right to our desktop, and then we're ready for turning on Hyper-V roll. So now we watched a copy of Windows rebooting. Let me reduce screen clutter here and explain again. You're looking at the Supermicro server in this window. The other desktop's just an administrative laptop that's being used for this video. You're still got video on your end, Dan?
Yes, all looks good.
Okay, great. And on these reboot segments, I'll probably just speed up the lulls here, post-production. All right, a little bit of time elapsed there. I had to step away for a bit. But we're back about an hour later, and the only thing that happened is Windows finished booting, Windows Server 2016, and it went and locked itself up. So let's unlock that again, Dan, and we'll be able to resume. And I think this is the third boot. And when I did that little netpl-wiz thing, it just kind of auto-logged in for us.
Hey, Paul?
Yes.
Your time on your clock?
Yep.
Not sure if you wanted to change that.
Okay. Yep. So in the bottom right, you'll see it's mismatching the server. Let me go with consistent, and actually that... Sorry. Did you notice that bug? I actually noticed that on Tech Preview 4.
I did not.
Let me show you that again. So I right-click on the clock, adjust time. You get this, but you can blow right past it.
Yeah, so that's because some applications are not available when you're logged in as the administrator user. If you were to launch Edge or any number of other applications like the Microsoft Store, you'd get that same message.
Okay.
In this particular case, it actually lets you do it, but it's reminding you that you shouldn't be in the administrator account.
Okay, we're ready. What would you like me to do next, Dan?
Okay, so we want to install the Hyper-V role. So you're in Server Manager. There's a couple of ways you can do that. You'll notice that in the Quick Start, you have an Add Roles and Features, but I would go to Manage, right where you're at. Under Manage, you can do Add Roles and Features and do it there. And the reason why I'm doing it there is because from the dashboard, things can change and go into different locations. So this is just going to pop up a wizard to walk you through the process. On the Before You Begin page, you can just kind of blow by that and say next.
Okay. Just give me one moment. Just to get rid of the window on window effect, let me go ahead and make one window only here. So my IP address, oops. Earlier we set it up. Okay, it was a little slow, but RDP just came up full screen, and now we just have Server 2016 filling our whole screen. Less confusing than having two copies of Windows showing.
Sure.
All right, so where were we? Here we go. You were saying?
All right, so on this screen, you can just click Next on the Before You Begin page. For the installation type, we're going to actually be installing a role. So you're going to leave the default for role-based or feature-based installation. The next point is to just select the server. Now, what's selected by default is the current server that you're on, and that's in fact what we want to do. So we can just select Next here, but it does give you additional opportunities to select a virtual hard disk or select a different server from a pool. And in our case, we're just going to click Next. And if you look down about halfway down, you'll see the Hyper-V role. We just want to turn that checkbox on. It'll automatically pop up a box to ask if you want to enable those additional features. Make a note of the include management tools if applicable. You want to make sure that is turned on. If you don't turn that on, then you'll have to either manually install those or you have to remotely manage it. In our case, we want to manage it on the physical box, so we want to have that turned on. And just click on Add Features. And then you can go ahead and click Next. There are no additional features that we need to install, so on the Features box, you can just click Next, which will take us to our Hyper-V wizard, if you will, to do customize or configuration of Hyper-V. This is just kind of an information screen, so you can click Next on that, which will lead us to our virtual switch. Now, this is where some people make a mistake on their deployment of or their installation, is they don't check either one of these boxes. You can do this later. You can add these switches later, but it's a lot easier to do it now. Now, notice you have two network adapters that you can select and actually reserve one of these. So go ahead and turn on your Ethernet network, and then what that does is it's going to automatically create a virtual switch for that network adapter. And if you want to do the second one, you're welcome to, but to simplify it, I would just probably do one. You can always add the second one later too, and I can show you how to do that.
Okay, and obviously it didn't pick up 10 gig drivers by default with auto update. apparently.
Correct.
So, yep. And it was sitting for about an hour, so Windows Update might have had a chance to do some stuff. I'll take a look at that device manager in a little bit.
All
I'm
right.
going to hit next now. Here we go.
Now, for migration, if you're going to do live migration gives you the capability of moving a virtual machine from one machine to another without having to bring it down. If you want this machine to either move or to become a receiver of a move, so if you want it to send or receive, you'll need to turn this checkbox on and then set the authentication protocol that you'd like to use. For our case, for now, we can just leave this turned off and kind of go with the defaults because we're just doing a simple installation. Now, this is where I want to advise people to make a change. First of all, I don't recommend that you put the virtual machines or the data files on the C drive. In our case, we do want to use the C drive because we have a super fast disk that we want to leverage. But just to simulate putting it on a different drive, I want to go through the process of putting it in a different location. So in our case, we're going to just create a folder. So you can just click on Browse on either one of those.
Okay.
And go to this PC. Go to the C drive, and you can just do right-click or click on the C drive and then make new folder. And we're just going to call that Hyper-V. Okay, say OK. And let's go ahead and say OK to that. Now, that's going to put your disks in the Hyper-V folder. Let's go ahead and do the same thing on the virtual machine configuration. And this time, we're going to put it in a subfolder. You don't have to. You could put it in the same place, but I'm going to make a new folder into there. And I usually just call it VMs. And that'll be for your virtual machine configuration files. So say OK to that. And, again, that's going to generally be on the D or the E or the F drive, but we're doing it on the C drive in this demonstration. So say Next. We're going to confirm the configuration. You'll notice there's a checkbox for restart the destination server after automatically if required. I recommend that you do that to restart it, but you don't have to. You can restart it manually once the installation is completed. And then you'll have to confirm that you want it to restart and click Install. This doesn't take very long to do the install, maybe about a minute or so, depending on the performance of your hardware. But it does require a couple of different reboots. So what we'll do is we'll switch back over to be able to look at it on the console so we can watch it go through that process.
Yep, it'll obviously bump us off of RDP as soon as it kicks off the reboot. So CPU is hardly doing anything. And disk perf. Disk monitor is off by default. So there's still that, if you want to turn that on, that's an option, right? On Windows 10, it shows by default now, like hard drive activity. Yeah. But on the server, they left that off still. CPU is doing almost nothing. So that's one of the things about NVMe drives. You see, even when they're getting hit hard, you barely notice the CPU doing anything. There's less overhead without the SATA and HCI protocol in the way. It's 2/3 done already.
Yeah, and underneath the...
Oops, there goes the reboot.
There it goes.
So you see how quickly it knocked me off RDP, and now it's rebooting. And wow, that was pretty quick. You weren't kidding. That was well under a minute for the whole thing. You were saying?
Yeah, it actually has to do a couple of reboots as it goes through this process, because what it's actually doing is it's lifting up the OS and laying down the hypervisor layer underneath the operating system. So whenever it actually boots, your virtual machine, though it looks like it's the host, it's actually running in a special, partition that's running on top of the virtualization layer.
All right, and talk us through then. Hyper-V is going to be taking over this NIC in some sense for VMs, right?
Correct. What it does, and we can go look at your network connections whenever we're done, but before we set up that, in fact, you can look at the difference because you have two networks and one of them we didn't attach yet. So you can see what the NIC normally looks like and then what it looks like once it's being taken over. But what it really does is it takes your NIC and it changes it into kind of like a bridge. But it creates a new virtual network, a virtual NIC, and your entire IP stack is on that NIC. And the physical NIC is really kind of just a pass-through.
Do you think it was smart? Sorry, do you think it was smart to pick the first one, or should we have picked the second one for a little simplicity?
No, it really doesn't matter.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it really doesn't matter which one you. In fact, you don't have to do either. We could manually set that up, and once we get in there, I'll show you where you would go and do that.
So if I had a second Hyper-V machine next to it and I was using 10 gig between the two with a 10 gig switch or a direct connect cable, which auto crossovers, yeah, I'd want to use that for VMs, of course, naturally.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, one of the things that you would probably do in that scenario is you would probably use, a lot of times you'll dedicate a particular NIC to certain roles or capabilities. So you might dedicate that for your live migration network, or you might dedicate that to a backup network, or dedicate that to a production network, and use the primary NIC for your management network. So there's lots of different ways that you can configure that, and kind of really depending on the needs or how much bandwidth you're gonna need on the different interfaces that you set up. You could also use the different NICs for different guests. So you don't have to have, because you have multiple NICs, you could use multiple NICs and have different VMs on those different NICs. So you can have, a physical separation between them as well.
In the simple flat network, well, if we turned on live migration, then 10 gig would really shine. Imagine you had a lot of memory, 96 gig of RAM in a VM, and you're going to live migrate it to another machine nearby. You do a whole lot better on 10 gig, I would think.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh, that's interesting. My auto login scheme failed because I had the wrong password in there. And you had mentioned you're going to want to harden this when we feel like we're kind of done.
Yep.
All right. I'll go ahead and RDP back into it, or are we destined for another reboot?
RDP back into it.
All right.
And that'll take a minute to finish loading all those services anyway.
Oh, yeah. I see it doing stuff.
Okay, so what you'll see happen automatically just by logging in is it automatically launched Server Manager, and it automatically popped open the Add Rules and Features wizard to finish that installation. So it shows you right underneath the status bar there that the installation succeeded on your machine name. So you can go ahead and close out. So go ahead and click Close, and then behind you, you'll see now a couple of things. You have the Hyper-V under Roles and Servers group, where if you click on your Hyper-V, you can look at your events and your services and your any activities you have associated with that. And you'll also see it on the nav bar on the left-hand side. You could have also clicked there to get to it. But what we want to do is we want to actually go in and manage Hyper-V at this point. So if you click on Tools in the upper right-hand corner, you can bring up another menu, which will bring up your Hyper-V Manager. So in Hyper-V Manager, if you click on your server name, a couple things. If you right-click on it and select Properties, Hyper-V Settings, a couple things that I want to point out. Notice here is where you would change these are kind of your global settings for your hypervisor. So you have the virtual disk location, the virtual machines is the next one down, your physical GPUs, your NUMA spanning, live migrations, any things that you want to set up with this. We're not going to change anything here. For now, let's go ahead and cancel out of this. I just wanted to kind of show you where all of those other settings are. All right, now if we go to the virtual machine manager and open that up on the right-hand side. Nope, on the right-hand side under your actions. Virtual switch manager, sorry. Now, if you could bring up in another window, just click on your start or right-click on your start and bring up your network connections.
Yeah, public not so good, but that's okay. All right, here's what we got.
All right, so a couple things that you'll notice. If your virtual Ethernet adapter, your Hyper-V Ethernet adapter is actually one that was created. So if you click on that bottom one there and go to Properties, you'll see that it has the entire stack of your entire IP stack. So that's the virtual switch. That's not the physical network card. Okay, so we can go ahead and cancel out of this. And then look at your first Ethernet adapter, which is the one that we tied it to. And go to Properties on that. And you'll see that it only has the Microsoft LLDP protocol driver. It doesn't have your full IP stack on it. So your physical NIC is no longer tied to the network. Okay, so you can go ahead and cancel out of this. Now, you're logged in as the administrative user. Let us go ahead and create another user. So if you
Hey,
hit
Dan,
Window, yep,
sorry. I wanted to follow what you just did, and I'm not real clear on what ipconfig all is going to show me at command line. Do you mind if I just do that? I want to take a
sure,
peek.
go right ahead.
I want to really understand what it's done with the network. So here, let's make that big. Let's scroll back a little bit. All right, so we have my physical Ethernet that ends in A53E, A53F. So ETH0, the first one on the motherboard, the bottom left port, is 142. We connected to 183. So that's the second Ethernet, ETH1 maybe. That's how it would be enumerated in other OSs.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see the lower and the upper MAC. Okay. So yeah, I obviously got in over RDP on the other
But
network.
so the 180, the .183, notice that is your virtual Ethernet adapter. Okay.
Virtual
Your other
switch
one,
right
your
there, yeah.
.142 is the connection 2. That's the one that we did not use.
Okay, let's scroll down and see the rest. There's nothing else to see there. Okay.
Right. Okay.
Yep.
So if you go back before we reboot, let's do one other thing. Go back in your network connections again.
Yeah, sure. I'm done at the command line, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And so notice the one I showed you, the one that we are connected to. Now look at the one that we are not connected to. If you right click on the Ethernet 2, this is what a network card normally looks like, right? You have the entire IP stack. But you don't, because it's all been virtualized now, or the virtualization layer has taken over that network stack. Okay?
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You can go ahead and cancel that. And then let's go ahead and, one of the most important things we want to do is we want to not operate as the administrative user, because a lot of things are simply disabled as an administrator. So let's go ahead and create a user that we can actually do some stuff in.
So we're done here in canceling? Sorry, Dan.
Yep, you can go ahead and just cancel out of that.
So the default network it had was fine. All right, cancel. Yep. All right. What's your favorite way for me to do user management?
That's fine. And then just go to computer management. And if you expand local users and groups and then click users and then right click on the white space or on the folder, and we're going to add a new user. Give it whatever username you like. Give it a decent password that you'll remember. Turn off user must change password at next login. And you can go ahead and turn on password never expires, sure. Go ahead and create that user. Now, all we've done is created a user, but it's just a standard user. We need to make that an administrative user. So go ahead and click close, and then right-click on that user, select properties, and then go to member, and you can do add. Now, the easy way for the novice user is, instead of typing in the name, is just click on advanced in the lower left-hand corner and then find now.
Yeah,
it'll show a list of all of the groups that are available to you. And if you expand that, you can read it. Administrators is the most important one, but I want to turn on administrators as well as remote desktop users. And you can actually do a multi-select by holding the control key as well.
Cool. You're right. I should have done that. All right. So remote desktop users. Okay. And we got the two that you wanted right there.
Yep. And then say OK. And OK again. All right. Now, I do not want to disable administrator yet. In fact, I'm not going to do that at all. Okay. But what I do want to do is I want to go ahead and log in as that user and make sure that I have administrative permissions, and then we can actually go do stuff. So you can log out.
Okay.
And then we'll log in as that user.
Just a little tip here. When you go to desktop in Windows and hit Alt F4, you always get this dialog, whether it's Windows 10 client or server, you can still restart and shut down as long as you go to the desktop first. So you actually wanted me to sign out?
Sign out, yep.
Okay, no problem.
And then we'll log in as that new user.
Great. Let's fire up. And actually, the domain was, no, it worked. Okay. You just saw a brief little thing at the top is to set up a profile. Pretty fast login for a brand new user. Not too shabby.
Yep. Another thing that I'll point out is on your login, if you're not sure of the computer name, just /user will get you, even if you don't know the machine name, which obviously most people are not going to know because it takes a default instead of prompting you nowadays.
Oh, nice.
So now let's go ahead and open up a command prompt and just see if we can ping out to yahoo.com or something.
I did an NS lookup. I picked a bad example because ping might be blocked there. There you go.
Okay. All right. So we have confirmed we have internet connectivity on the host. Sorry, we're on the virtual machine now, right? So if you go ahead and open your web browser.
Well
are we on the
physical.
host?
Yeah, no, we're on the host. Yep.
Okay. So let's go ahead and open up Hyper-V Manager then.
Yeah, it's going to be hardened and weird, but yep. Let me get rid of this pin. Get rid of there. Okay, there we go. Oh, it lets us do that because it's Microsoft welcome page. What happens if you go to...
Bingo. Okay. Now, that's 3/4 of the story. The rest of the story has to do with the virtual machine once you create it. What you've done is you've set up a network bridge so that any virtual machine that you create that uses that virtual network switch is automatically going to be bridged to your physical network adapter.
Okay, so that's an important point. We basically did an Next install. The only trick was make sure you got an Ethernet interface defined instead of just blowing past that one dialog. That's really
Correct.
it. That's what it all boiled down to, right?
It all boiled down to that. Yeah. Now, let's go ahead and go back into your Hyper-V Manager just for a moment, though. And I want to show you how to manually, if you do blow by that and not turn on that checkbox, how do you get saved from that? And if you go to Hyper-V Manager, then you can go into your Hyper-V, you go ahead and click on your server on the left-hand side. And then Virtual Switch Manager. You could do a new virtual switch, and you want to, so what we're going to do is we're going to create a new virtual switch for your other network adapter, okay? So I don't know if you want to go through kind of what the differences are between the types of switches, but if you just stay on the top under new virtual switch, there's external, internal, and private. External is going to link to a physical network card on the box. Okay? And internal is going to create, internal and private both create a dummy virtual switch, if you will, that doesn't have an external interface. You could create it through standard networking technologies for bridging and stuff like that, but generally the easy way to do it is to do an external that's tied to a physical NIC. So if we now click on Create Virtual Switch.
So you do want external, okay?
External, because we want to tie it to your second NIC. So we can just call this whatever you want for the name, and exactly. So
I don't know, something like that. It's the second one.
Right? So select the second switch. Now, notice the allow management operating systems to share this network adapter. You also have the capability of enabling single root I/O virtualization on this NIC. I'm going to, I think for default sake, I would say you can allow management on this network, but as you get deeper into virtualization, you may only want to do that on one. I'm of the nature of the management is pretty small over the network, so I leave it enabled for all of my NICs, and it's fine.
Yeah, let me just throw a device manager out there and talk about SRIV just for a moment. So that is a more advanced topic, as you hinted at. The 10 gig interfaces on the system do support it, and I've tested it. Let me just quickly see if the 10 gig drivers come down by any chance. Probably not. And it seems like Server 2016 shifts by default where it's not going to go sniffing out and replacing drivers on you unless you tell it.
Well, that's the behavior now. We'll see what happens in the future. I would assume because it's a server product that would be the case.
Correct, yeah. We'll see. Okay, so it did not.
Those updates are not available yet. You might be able to go to the manufacturer to download those directly, though.
Yep, and I've got those on my site on how to get the 10 gig. They're very easy to find at this
cool.
point. And also, once you do it, and if you turn on SRIV, well, you end up with a bunch of, drives. It sees a whole bunch of X552 Intel 10 gig interfaces. But again, that's more performance thing or a little more advanced. We don't need that right now. So we're just going to hit OK, right?
That's it. Hit OK.
Nothing else here. OK.
Correct. Everything else is good. Actually, before you do that, why don't we pop open our network, our networks to see what's in there now and kind of watch that being built?
So you want to leave this window open?
The list of your networks. Yeah, the change adapter settings.
Yep.
So we'll leave that one open while we're running this.
Okay, I should not have maximized that window, but I'll try to resize it quickly here. Okay, here I'm going to hit yes, and then I'm going to resize
and you'll see what it actually does is it changes your existing network, and it will disrupt your networks. I don't think you'll lose connection though, even though you're already P'd in. But you'll see it added another switch. It unplugged your network 2. And it reset everything. And if you look at the properties of Ethernet 2 now, you'll not see your IP stack there. Your IP stack won't be there anymore.
What do you know? Yep. All right. Thank you, Dan. That's a great overview of the networking. Appreciate it. Cool. And there's the new thing I named. The new
so
entity.
Now whenever you create a virtual machine, you just want to select one of those 2 networks to be tied to.
Okay. So frankly, a probably more logical name would be something like perhaps.
Perhaps, yes.
Yep.
Or you might use it for backup, or you might use it for live migration or whatever.
Okay. What's next to create our first VM?
Create our first VM.
All right. So that sounds good. So again, it's been a while.
Right-click, new. It's also available in the Actions pane on the right-hand side, new virtual machine.
Oh, yeah. Upper right, new virtual machine. Okay.
Again, we're just going to skip through a wizard. Next. Specify the name. What do you want to call it?
All right, well, we got to get an ISO somewhere, and I've got a network share with that, and we need to decide what OS. Windows 10, you think, or what should we do?
Whatever ISO you have handy, I would just, yeah, whatever. If you got an ISO for Windows 10 handy, that's fine.
Yep, and let me start the copy of that quickly here, because that's going to take a little time. Let's see.
You don't actually have to copy that down locally.
Okay, well, I was just going to crank up the speed a little.
Okay.
Let's see how fast it goes anyway. It's not going to be... it's a little painful. So let's let that finish while we're cooking on
But what that means is whenever you do the install, it'll also be a little painful because it's bringing those bits over the wire.
Well, yeah, but now at least I'm copying over 1 gig to the NVMe, so it should be really fast to create the VM once we get this done.
Correct.
Right, so while we're creating the VM, that'll be going in the background nicely. All right, we've given it that name.
Now, notice here that you can... It's by default selected your default location where we told it to store the VMs, but you can change it when you create the VM by just turning on the checkbox and it'll let you browse or
very nice
new path. So I'm going to say next. Now this is going to allow you to select specify the generation. The generation is going to dictate what capabilities are built into the virtual machine. So generally, I think you're going to use Generation 2, but if you're going to if you want to mount this on like an older Hyper-V virtualization stack, then you'll want to use Generation 1. Generation 2 does give you lots of extra capabilities from both security performance as well as the UEFI.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No problem. So if someone has, something pretty modern, a UEFI Surface Book, and they want to move this thing over, it's obviously going to have no trouble, even with Generation 2 for new hardware. Yep, I'm going to hit next.
And then for assigning memory, I like to start with whenever you're installing an OS at least 2 gig. So depending on how much memory you have in the machine, you want to start with 2 gig. If you got plenty to spare, you can start with 4 gig. The more memory you have as you're booting and as you're loading the OS, the faster it'll work.
Yep, and we have an insane number of 128 gig. So, which actually slows, let's just do a crazy big number, why not? That network copy, skipping a little bit, you'll see 128 gig, only 3% of it in use. So I'm going to go ahead and 10 gig, whatever. 30 gig, why not? All right, dynamic memory, you want to talk about that?
Okay, now dynamic memory gives you the capability of setting, first of all, let me just tell you the startup memory. By doing that, in order to start this virtual machine, your host has to have that much memory available. Otherwise, it will fail.
Yep, it's going to pull a third away. And if I crank that number too high, I won't even let it start, right? Is that the kind of
Correct.
failure? Okay, good.
Correct. And if you use dynamic memory, which I'm going to recommend we do, use dynamic memory, then after it starts, it will automatically bring the memory down to what you actually need for that box.
Nice.
Okay, so then go ahead and select Next. Now this is where we get to configure our networking. So if you drop that list down, you should see both of your networks there attached. Now we want to select the first one because that's the one we've got already configured for internet access. I'm not sure if you have the second one plugged into a physical wire or not.
It does, but I gave it a name of VM.
So you could use either one.
Okay. Yeah, let me go with the one I called VMs. I'm not sure why the word VMs doesn't show there. It shows the previous name I used, but that's okay. Probably had that modal dialog open already, something like that.
It could be, yep.
All right, I'll hit next. Oh, but there's no physical... Let me think about that. There's no switch. I should be using the other one, right? The one we put...
No, we created a switch for both of them.
Oh, we did. Okay. Never mind.
That's why it's in the drop-down list.
Good point. Okay. Create a virtual disk. So does this have the thin concept as well?
Yep, it does by default.
Very nice. So I'm just going to...
So I would say next. Just let it go with that.
Okay. So even if I wanted to pretend I have 3 terabytes, well, I'd have to have a UEFI system here.
Correct.
So I'm pushing, I know I'm asking you kind of an arcane question, but if I wanted a UEFI compatible BIOS for this VM that's booting?
All you have to do is make it a generation 2, which you did.
We've already covered that.
Yes.
So by default, it's going to be a UEFI BIOS type in this VM?
Because it's a generation 2, correct. If it's a generation 1, then it would not. But since we made it for when we specified the type, the generation, because it's a generation 2, it will be the default.
So would this make you nervous, a 3 terabyte drive, even though we're on only a half a terabyte SSD? No,
nope,
because it's
would
thin.
Not. Correct.
This is fun. All right.
So we can install an operating system from a bootable image, or what I would recommend is we install an operating system later, and I'll show you how to go do that. So instead of doing it while we're creating the virtual machine, we're going to just take that. We're going to add one additional step to walk through, and really mostly just because I want to show you how to do that, because there's a lot of times that you'll want to do the same thing after the fact.
Okay, so you want me to just hit next?
Just hit next, and then on the summary it tells us what we've selected, and you can just hit next.
Okay, it gives us a nice little summary screen. I'm hitting finish. And I probably should minimize that task manager. I don't want to block anything. Oh, it looks like it's...
Yep, so we'll just do finish.
Yep, minimize this.
Sorry about that phone ringing.
No problem. It looks like we're close to the file copy being done. There it goes. Nice timing. So this should be really speedy to install. All right, that's done. What is next, Dan?
Okay, so check on that ISO. Is that ISO copied over now?
Yep, just finished.
Okay.
Right click.
So if you right click and go to settings, I just turned on quiet mode on my phone so it stops bugging us. Now, if you go to the SCSI controller, click on the SCSI controller, you'll notice that you don't have a DVD drive, but you can add that. So if you click on DVD and click Add, then you can select the image file here. Okay? Browse. Okay? And notice what happened on the left-hand side. You see that you have a new device there.
Oh, yeah.
So by going through that process, you actually created that device. So that'll actually get a drive letter. And at the same time, it's mounting it with the ISO that you selected. So go and say OK. Now, all you got to do is turn it on. So if you right-click on the machine and hit Start, you could also hit Connect so that you can kind of see what's going on as it goes.
Now with UEFI BIOS, I'm curious how this is going to look. Do I have to quickly hit spacebar or something? Turned off. Whoops, we got a problem. Corrupt or unreadable. Oh. Boy, it said the ISO was done, but...
So it's having a problem reading the ISO. So if you right-click and mount, see if you can mount it.
Yeah, or even just double-click. Oh, wow.
Yeah, so there was a problem with the copy.
That does not happen in a long time. There's the file copy share. Wow, I have not had a corruption in a long time, so that's makes me think about the my network driver. That is
That's okay.
really
We can
weird that
just
actually corrupted that. I'll
yeah we
pause and let that finish, but yep.
yeah we can just pause and let that finish, and we'll come back right to where it was.
Um, while it's cruising, I really want to see device manager and see how old that driver is. If that fails the second time, I'll just grab USB. That'd be a little crazy. So that chipset only came out last summer, and no, it doesn't offer me a newer one. Okay. Um, you know what? I bet the source is the problem. That's
Do you have a server 2016 ISO on the machine already on the host?
well, that's what I'm saying. It must be corrupt there. I think we're just copying a corrupt file twice. So let me have a look at the size of it. Do you have one on your machine? How big should it be?
I do.
I think
Yeah.
it's truncated. That's got to be what happened here. Corruption's rare, but what's not so rare is maybe the connection dropped while I was copying it to that machine a couple weeks ago, getting
Yeah.
ready for a conference. So if my file size is small, we know we get the problem figured out. All right. Come on, server. Let's minimize here. Okay, this is the laptop now. No, that's not it. Hang on. 2 RDP windows, which makes things a little confusing. There we go. Now we're looking at the laptop with the suspect ISO. And 5 gig. What's the size of yours?
I'm checking it.
Oh, that's not the right one. Sorry, Windows 10. I don't know what I grabbed, but this is the one we want. So Windows 10 itself is 3.2 gigish, and my share folder's right here. And whatever this is, 3.8, just wasn't legit. So when I paste this in, let's see what size that sucker is, 3.1. All right, Windows build 10 586. I know that'll work. I've used it a dozen times. So that will be done shortly, but I'm still going to need to copy it over, darn it. It's just going to take a little time. What I have is a router I'll be traveling with its own DHCP. So when I do the demo later this week in Boston, I travel with the whole thing. It's got DHCP, it's got the whole rig just as you and I configured it with a private subnet of 192.168. So
Yeah.
it works smoothly that way. I just carry the whole thing and don't have to fiddle with the networking when I get to the site.
I actually have enterprise, so my sizes are a little bit different than yours.
Okay. Anyhow, I've used this ISO many times. This one is older, build 1040, right, from last
Yeah.
July, and I should have just get rid of that. Don't need it anymore. Okay, that's done copying, I think.
Now, I
What
do
just
have to leave in the next 5 minutes, so I'm kind of short on time because I've got a meeting tonight, user group meeting.
Okay, shoot. All right. Well, hopefully I get something going here. What just happened? Shared folder. Crud.
Do you want to cut or do you want to copy?
Cut and paste is fine. I just want to move. That's quick. All right. Got 5 minutes left, 4 minutes left. Now go back to RDP. Come on. In RDP. Get the network share back on the screen. Yeah, that's unfortunate. Why is that showing up?
So you're looking at shares here. Oh, this is going out to your other machine.
Yeah, local 1 gig cable. I don't know why it broke the share, but we did apparently. It's a little weird. Oh, it went to public. It was on public network too, which is interesting that the share was working at all. Ah, come on. I should have changed this to private network. And empty. There it goes. That was a little weird, but
Your other file is still there, even though you deleted it. Sure you got the right machine?
yeah, I think I Control Z and undid the delete because
Oh.
well, that's a little slow. All right, so we point to the ISO and then the install should boot. And basically that's the end of the video anyway. From there, you're installing,
Windows.
well, yeah, what do you call the tools?
You don't have to install anything. It's automatic.
All right, and how many years has that been true? Like 3-4 years? Something? It's been a while. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I
So device
probably
manager all
since
look pretty...
2008.
Okay, well, that's copying device manager. Did it clean up the Intel Xeon chipset stuff? Remember we had a whole bunch of weirdness in the system area, and yes, the yellow bangs went away for everything but Ethernet, so that's good. System devices cleaned itself right up. So that makes for a pretty nice install. So the days of hunting and pecking around for Intel chipset drivers for all this stuff, don't worry about it. Intel and Microsoft finally worked that out. I'm quite thankful. That's a good move. All right, so I want to right-click and change my ISO. So let's get back to this.
So the Hyper-V Manager.
Yeah, I can minimize that.
We don't actually want to select. In fact, if you try to select it now, it'll fail because it's still being copied. It doesn't need exclusive access of that, which I think, well, I haven't tried it with 2016. In prior versions, it needed exclusive access, which basically means you can't have you can't have the same ISO mounted to multiple virtual machines at the same time, which I think kind of sucks. But I don't know if they fixed that in 2016 or not. I haven't tested it.
So like puts a lock on that file. Yeah, if you're in a shared
if
environment.
If you tried to open it now, it would probably see it as not a valid file because it's not finished copying over yet. But you just go into properties.
Yep, working on it. It's sluggish because of the copy.
Yeah.
Looking at the throughput. So it is limited by the SSD that we're pulling from. Interesting that for this Skype call, it worked fine.
Yeah.
It stayed on. All right, and if we look at the green progress bar, we see we're at about 60% in the bottom left. I love that progress bar in File Manager.
Nice feature.
Very handy, yep. There's our DVD. So as Dan was just explaining, weirdness might happen if I try to point to this ISO that's in the middle of being copied. And if it does complain, that probably means it's still one user at a time to access an ISO. Let's see what happens when I try to click Apply or click OK. You can see Windows 10 586 is a file name. I gave it, but that's, it didn't complain yet because I haven't booted it maybe.
Yeah, I wouldn't try to boot it because then you might end up with corruption in that file.
We're very close.
But that might mean that it no longer requires exclusive access. So that'll be something I'll have to test.
Yeah, it seems it didn't complain. So we're at 72%. I know you have to bolt just as soon as I get this VM fired up, but basically I'm going to see the Windows install start. And that was about all we wanted to cover today, right, Dan? Is there any...
Correct. So the only last thing that I'll note is whenever you, because you've already configured all the networking on this, whenever you boot the Windows 10 machine, it should automatically just connect to the internet.
Okay, so there should be no legwork at all. This VM should just come up. We answer a bunch of questions. It's going to find an empty 3 terabyte drive, and it's going to reboot. Its device manager will look clean because it's Windows 10 and it's smart about running inside of Hyper-V, you were saying.
Correct.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and record the rest of the video, without you watching over my shoulder, and highly likely I'll have success showing that off. What do you think? Can you wait for this? It's at 80 something or 90%.
Yeah, let's give it a couple more minutes.
Cool. 91%.
Interesting. It doesn't update the graphic though. The thumbnail graphic, it doesn't get updated. The text does.
Yeah, I spotted that earlier, right there. I feel like Windows 10 might. That might be a minor little thing we just found in the tech preview. Okay, it's done.
So if we
Right-click
go to
connect this
settings,
time.
yep, and we already have the disk attached.
Now I'm just going to boot boot it right
So
here.
all we should have to do is start it,
Yep.
and it'll start the Windows 10 launch. Now you don't have to like press a space bar or anything to launch from DVD because the drive that it has is a blank drive. So the first thing it's going to try to do, because it is UEFIs, it's going to try to do a Pixie or network boot. Since we don't have a network boot server, that's going to fail. You can escape to cancel out of that, and then it's going to just boot to the ISO. The Generation 2 supports the network boot. Generation 1 does not.
Okay, now instinctively, sorry, out of habit, I hit spacebar. But you're saying I didn't need to because it had no OS
Correct.
on the hard drive. It would have just started booting that.
Correct.
Nice. Okay, this should be the fun screen. We got a quick EULA to read carefully, and then we got a 3 terabyte drive to see. Be a nice way to end this. Cool. We already see little icons about mouse. All right. Anything significant in your parting thoughts about what's happening in 2016 versus 2012 for Hyper-V?
Well, I've got a bunch of stuff on my blog already, and I've got a lot more that's going to be coming in the course of the next couple of months. I think there's just so much stuff that really can't even begin to touch it in a couple of minutes. But I mean, there's big performance differences. There's big cloud changes with direct integration with the cloud. Some of the stuff that I've already got posted is on the storage stack and the changes coming with the storage stack for storage spaces. There's just really a ton of stuff. Note your 3 terabyte drive there.
Yep, there it is, 3,000 gig. Okay. Speed should fly. As I mentioned earlier, I could use Resource Manager to have a live look at how my hard drive's doing, what kind of speeds we're getting. But or I can turn on the counters for hard drives again, I believe. I'll probably play with that. So thank you, Dan. I know you need to go. I really appreciate this huge chunk of your time, and I can't wait to see you near Boston for VertG this Thursday.
All right, great. Thanks for having me. And just a reminder, if anybody wants to check out some of the stuff that I've already done on Server 2016 or anything else, they can find that content on my blog at itproguru.com. If they want to reach me, they can reach me on Twitter at itproguru.
Okay, so it's a few minutes later,
Thanks,
and the install is finishing up. I'm going to have a look here at disk speed. So I've got ATTO, an ancient disk speed testing tool. It just helps give me an idea quickly if I'm getting the speeds I would expect to be getting out of my NVMe storage. I could also go ahead and get Samsung Magician. Okay, Samsung has dramatically revamped their website. So you'll notice I'm able to use the Edge browser. Now Windows 10 versus Windows Server, it's a little bit different. There's several different ways to change a network location, but again, what I'm looking at here is they all got called public network, and we may not want that. We may want to make it private. But remember, even in this video, you saw me set up remote desktop connection over a public connection. It's not that big a deal. when this VM is done being built and the I/O is settled down, I'll go ahead and run the benchmark. I wrote about that years ago. Wow. That's an ancient article. Sorry, got too many things going on at once. I'm installing Samsung Magician at the same time as trying to turn on disk perf so I can see disk performance. Meanwhile, the Windows 10 VM install is finishing up. Would you want to run Samsung Magician on a server generally? Not really, but we can with Hyper-V. Just point that out. In other environments, Samsung Magician or the like, Trim utilities or its own internal benchmarking, they're just not available. So it's one nice thing about having the Windows GUI. There's also drawbacks, of course, to installing any third-party software on a server. All right, I can't resist. I want to see disk perf. What's the difference? Okay, let's open up. Actually, it's easier to right-click here, Command Prompt Admin. Go to Task Manager, and we still don't get disk performance counters showing in Task Manager. So I guess that's just no, they're there. Okay. So now we can get a look on the fly of, what kind of disk I/O we have going on. Okay, firmware update, all that good stuff is there. I can run the benchmark in a minute, but okay, so we've paused this. I now have Task Manager showing me that the disk I/O is close to 0. So that's cool. And now I'm about to cream the disk with a bunch of I/O. I've got the fan speed on the chassis on high, so we shouldn't have any thermal throttling bite us here for this quick test to get a sense of our speeds. Okay, that finished up. Those results look good. All right, so the speeds we would expect look like this versus what we actually got, which looks like that. So let's compare the two. Definitely lower. Not really sure why. We'd be turning it, but they turn out fine when you get up here. So I don't know what to make of that. But that's okay. This is really convincing me that I am ready for a demo I'm doing later this week, and that the speeds are quite all right. And that the driver's using the latest Samsung there, so we're all good to go. All right. How about I finish up having a look at that VM? My mouse seamlessly went in and out of the window. So all I have to do is move my mouse in and out. There's no Control-Alt or releasing a mouse from being hostage or any of that. .67 gig, extremely tiny. Not sure what to make of that. Let's see how it did with Windows updates. Okay, server behaves differently. Okay, stop fighting it. How about if I click here and go to settings, system, wow, I gotta find where they put Windows Update. There it is. No updates available. So Tech Preview 5, if it actually did an update, there they come. Alright, I'll let all that happen. I might run another disk benchmark. Anyhow, now it's getting everything ready. I should have the desktop showing soon. And then I'll wrap this up. Okay, that ran. So Dan was saying we should have network connectivity in the VM. Test that next. And it looks like we do. So that means I should be able to grab ATTO diskbench and see if we're getting the same or similar performance in the VM. What is going on here? Okay, disks has settled down. Nothing else is going on. Got Hyper-V GUI running. We got one VM running. And now we're seeing the performance. I should not have closed that ATTO disk benchmark window. Sorry about that. Already I do see the numbers smaller though. I'll have to go back and look at the video to compare, but I'm going to let that run. See how it goes. I'll speed up this segment of video here. Well, that was interesting. Some crazy caching or something. It's not like Samsung Magician has rapid mode turned on. So why would show some crazy number beyond the 2500 and 1500 reads and writes for the SSD? I don't know. But the results are favorable. The VM is performing admirably up until things got weird. Let's see. Still slower though. Took a while to get up to full speed here. So still don't quite know what that's about. But all right, I think I'm done with showing off the basics of so it's a little while later, and the network drivers kind of dawned on me that I want to just fix the 10 gig. So we've got this older article now from last summer, and it talks about the different steps for Windows 10. And they were similar with Windows Server, but we don't care about video. We do care about 10 gig, but that's kind of an old driver, all right? And that comes right from Supermicro site. You'll see it's FTPing. I want to go newer. So let's do a couple things here. Let's just try FTP first of all. So if we poke around that folder, the answer appears to be no. There's no updated driver there. So, well, wait a minute. Here's a 2016 May folder. So let's take a look at that. All right. Do we know what version that is? Oh, it's ancient. Completely irrelevant. Dead end. Sorry. That was a rabbit hole. So yeah, the right place, if you go to download, Intel driver, you Google search for X552, you get this. And then you might think, oh, well, shouldn't I find, if I hit Control F, shouldn't I find F552 or 557, the device? You would think so, but don't give up yet. This driver page has a release notes.txt file. Now watch what happens. What do you know? X552. And it's warning me it's not supported. Let's do the next hit for ProSet. Who cares about ProSet? And now it's saying 552 has some features missing. But either way, why is it talking about the 552? Well, that's because this driver is going to work. So this is how I found a driver on Intel that was newer a few months ago. And today I'm just going to try it again. So where is the download? Now I got to figure out which of these to grab. This. But the thing is, I don't actually want to run ProSet. ProSet's not going to work. So what we really want to do is grab 7-zip. All right, but we don't want to do it on a server, right? So let's copy this out and hang out over on the laptop where it's safe to do this kind of stuff. Downloading, extracting, etc. All right, so now I'm going to extract this ProWin X64 thing, and I just want the driver out of it. I don't want to run ProSet. Let me just test it for a second. Here's the installer. And it's going to extract. Okay. So that's cool. All the drivers are coming right out. We don't need 7-zip or anything third party. When you click the exe, it automatically explodes itself. To a temp folder. Drivers, advanced. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and try it. Let's see how it goes. So we're back in the server. And I'm going to try to install just the driver. I'm looking carefully at the directory. And if it wants to ram ProSet down my throat, I'm going to bail. Because the README tells me ProSet's not even supported. So why do I want that cluttering up my system? Okay, so it lets me turn off ProSet. That looks promising. Let's do a before and after of Device Manager. So these Ethernet controllers should go away. The nice thing with the installer is we don't have to right-click and poke around for the driver folder. Interesting. I think the only reason it asked me to close that is because it was going to do ProSet. Okay, that didn't go so well. So before I click OK and clean up the drivers, I don't want to. I want to do this. Type set. All right, there's my temp folder. And as usual, you got to kind of type it. So I probably should have done that right. All right, once you get in that folder, gosh, it's going to drive me nuts. I can't believe they still hide file extensions. All right, it's fixed. All right, so here we are in extraction land. If we sort by time, we should see around midnight something blew up, exploded. There we go. That's not it. How about the other folder? Now we're talking. We should be able to get a driver out of here. And it seems like we're probably talking about 10 gig would be here. X, Roman numeral 10. So let's copy that. All right, so now we've made ourselves an install directory. I can go ahead and put this in the path. Let this fail. Temp directory's probably gotten cleaned up. We don't care. We already grabbed what we need to proceed with a nice, clean, Intel utility-free 10 gig driver. Notice all we have is Samsung Magician and the driver. That's the only stuff we've put on the system so far. So I right-click, update driver, manually browse, paste, right? Because I already have the path. And just hit next. See if it sniffs out a driver. That's looking really promising. How crazy is this? The same thing I've been doing for, 20 years with Intel ProSet stuff. And that's it. We now have an absolutely legit driver. I can't wait to see the date on it, actually. Oh, let me cancel. Sorry, I want to show you something. I'm too busy gabbing. Right-click, update. Now, automatic's probably going to work because we already have the driver locally for the first interface. There you go. Right-click, properties, driver. All right, November. So a little newer than what I was doing last summer in my article. Time to update my article. It's going to be a little crazy. If you try to update it again, it's probably going to find nothing. And let's make sure the two network interfaces match. Also super important to see the link speed. Close that. Right click. Is it also November? Sure is. And now, how about down here? Why is it complaining with a red X? Something to do with turn on Hyper-V? Not really sure. Okay, so we're all good there, except it's not showing speed. So this is not such a good view. I want to see the negotiated speed. I guess I'm not going to see that from this view. That's a little weird. Come on. All right, 1 gig by double clicking it. All right, and that's because it's attached to a 1 gig switch. So now I'm going to attach the two ports to each other. It'll do auto crossover, and then I'll see 10 gig. I'm also going to work on the private public thing. Let me do that first. Public and private. Remember this article? How to change from public to private. Let's go to the GP edit technique. GP edit. All right, and let's just follow along with this. Windows settings, security settings, network lists, unidentified, private. Okay. Okay, if we go to a plain old network, user permission can change location. Now we didn't log off and log on, but it doesn't matter, it instantly turned to private. So in the server, the process of fixing this was a little different, but all of them showed private now, and I'm happy. Did that change anything with firewall roles to RDPN? Well, let's make sure. So I'm happy with the network. Last piece, let's get 10 gig going. How will you know when it's 10 gig? How about I leave it on a screen that makes some sense and remove some clutter? Don't really know what's the deal with that red X. That does still kind of bother me because I just don't like a mystery really. All right, we're also going to want to make sure our VM can still, get to the internet. So just for grins, since I'm going to reboot anyway and pause the video, how about I restart? So Hyper-V in Windows Server 2016 is now rebooting, which you'll see right over here. Okay, I'll be right back after I get those network ports recabled. All right, PLWiz is failing. Good for a lab or virtual machine. Horrible idea for a production server. Come on. All right, the red X is still there, so that we just live with. It's trying to identify the two networks that are attached to one another. So those are a little bit in limbo there. And they're not likely to be very happy ever because they're not going to find a DHCP server. So let's go ahead and manually hardcode those at something. 10.10.10.101. No DNS, no gateway, just wire to each other. And actually, because of the Ethernet 3, let's call it 3, and then the other one will be 4. Okay, so 10 gig negotiated for the speed. We know this. Click details, shows the IP that I just set. Now, of course, kind of hard when you have only one interface to be all that convincing. Oops. Wow. It's late. All right. What does this mean? This is tricky. Doesn't mean much, but the IPs did stick. It's configured. How to move traffic over them with a utility, that's a whole different story. I actually have a video of me doing that, testing out 10 gig. So, Hyper-V, did we break anything? All right, let's not restrict you to this dinky little window. Let's get back to one last run at Hyper-V. Probably should have created a shortcut for that because I keep connecting over and over through this video, probably driving you a little nuts. Not really thrilled with the name of the computer I gave it there, but that's okay. Probably should have fixed that. and it does not want to save those credentials. All right, we're back in to have another swig at Hyper-V. Yep, we're on the Hyper-V box. That means this icon shows. That means we got this thing to click on. And never did find a way to pin it to the start bar. I'm sure there is. All right. For the virtual machine settings, let's see what we got. Do you remember the DVD? No need to have that mounted anymore, right? Or you can even remove the DVD-ROM drive if you have no intent of mounting it again. All right. If I double-click this, what does it do? It brings up the console. And, well, there you have it. Let's see if Windows Update ran. I can't remember if this VM was left running very long or... All right, so a whole bunch of Windows updates happen to have hit. That's going to slow things. But also kind of interesting if we want to run one more time on the NVMe driver and just see if ATTO gives me the same exact results both times. Okay, we have a super minor single Defender definition update for the Server 2016 itself. And as far as the Windows 10 VM, well, no shocker that it has a bunch of updates because it's been several months since this build here. What build are we talking about? This one, build 10.586. What I was supposed to do, instead of reboot like I did right away, I was supposed to check that the network still works in the VM. And that would conclude this video to hopefully convince you that a SuperServer is a pretty nice way to go for a Hyper-V environment and not particularly difficult to install. I made this video way longer than it needed to be because Dan and I gave a whole lot of detail and kind of background and hopefully useful tips, especially for folks newer to Hyper-V. So hopefully that background information will really help you and not scare you off from trying this because, of course, as you know, Windows runs on a whole lot of gear. So does Windows Server. Having nice, stable, and fast Ethernet drivers, well, the Intel drivers are quite lovely once you know how to deal with them. You saw I had to fight with them a little to get a package that's suitable for the X552. I don't know if Supermicro has published just that subset of what is needed. From what I can tell, their FTP site looked like they just stuck with the old ones from last summer. So now we've got a driver that's 4 months newer. I've actually tested these with SRIOV, an advanced feature that we mentioned briefly earlier in the video. All right, disk perf. Let's turn that off. I know I'm making multiple changes. So if we look at Task Manager, the drives went away immediately, no reboot required, like it said. I can't imagine that having a whole lot of overhead impact. We did a thin drive, but again on an SSD, when I've used thin drives before, or thin VMs, no problem when it's an SSD. So what Dan had me do was probably the most versatile VMs. They're not necessarily the most performant VMs on what he showed as far as setting up a Hyper-V environment. While we're waiting on that, we can click on Memory and Networking and Replication. It just tells you some stats down there. All right, where were we with that console? Right there. quick look at the menus. There's our settings. There's our EFI environment. I'd say that install was pretty slick. Interesting. Secure boot is turned on, but no TPM. An insane amount of RAM. I forgot to show you how much RAM there was going to be there. Memory weight. And I only gave it one processor. Could have gone a little nicer to the VM there. Gosh, and more updates, right? You know how this goes. Before I do that, just make sure all the RAM shows up. I'm going to shut down. I'm going to give it 4 CPU cores out of 8. Why not? All right, notice disk counter show in Windows 10, as I mentioned. And the memory shows 30 gig. Very nice. Okay, and this time it said shutdown instead of update and shutdown because the updates were installed. All right, I could have left that connected, but that's okay. So let's go crazy. Let's add a, so there you go. 100 gig of 128 gig machine. Why not? The server's barely breathing hard or doing anything. How much is Hyper-V using up in memory? 3. All right, so I'm not too worried about that. And how about that processor? Beef that sucker up. Can leave the relative weights and all that stuff alone. Double click, hit the green thingy, and wait for it. Wouldn't be a shocker if it took a little longer to boot because of the insane amount of memory. There you go. So you can see it ramped up and used up a giant chunk to boot it. So 100 is in use. All right. Does it have a network connection? Sure does. See if we get decent speeds out of it. VM looks happy. What brand and what speed of network do we see? We see 1 gig. Makes sense because we're on a 1 gig connection. Oops, let's run that. All right, so this will give me a sense of if I'm getting decent throughput to the internet anyway. Much better test to be local NVMe drive traffic, which we're about to generate with another run of ATTO disk bench. Now that I've given it more CPU cores, let's double check on the RAM and the CPU cores. Interesting that it's so busy. I don't understand why. That's not the browser. That's something else. All right, so I think Windows Update's still, compressed memory. Look at that. It's doing something. Anyhow, I kind of asked for trouble asking for such an insane amount of RAM. So system and compressed memory, that's pretty interesting right there. You can probably tell I like to dig under there's a bunch of stuff. Kind of like to dig under the covers, right? Even things like resource monitor can be fun. So this is not a good time to run a benchmark because clearly some stuff is still going down with this system here. It's doing things. I don't know. There we go. CPU settling a little bit. Oh yeah, how do we do in the speed? Did I finish up? Nice. Getting full internet speed in the VM. I'm not the least bit worried about any of that. Whew. Actually, the quality dropped a little. Whatever. Okay. ATTO is where I'm going to wrap this eternal video. So we've got a VM. And I believe we threw ATTO on it earlier. And this time I'm going to leave it visible. And I'm going to close all the other junk. So, on the left, put it on the right. On the right we have a VM, and on the left we have natively this machine. So, we're going to run it twice. Let's just kill one drive. Don't need that at the moment. And here in this machine, no need for Samsung Magician. Okay, got a couple of pretty clean systems. We could do performance. Wow, that takes getting used to, that it's not going to find that stuff. Let's try that again. I am sorry. Come on. Power, I guess the word I'm supposed to be searching for, right? But we're not going to find it there either. Systems, power, and sleep sounds good. Don't really want the screen turning off on my server necessarily, because actually I don't do locally attached video anyway. And it's unbalanced. Okay, we now have a high performance machine. Be interesting to see if that increases watt burn just a little bit, but I don't have the USB thing attached right now to check the watt burn. Okay, so now we're in high performance on both machines. Hyper-V hosting it and the VM over on the right. Finally, ready to get going with running the benchmark. Sorry for all the talking, but kind of want to explain what I'm doing rather than just sliding windows around without you having any idea of the rationale behind what I'm attempting. Yeah, I know. I'm supposed to increase the queue depth and the length, but most people don't. So I'm, again, trying to establish a baseline compared to what most other people have found. Okay, I'm going to speed up this part of the video until the benchmark's done. Hang in there. Well, what a pleasant surprise seeing those spectacular numbers again. Faster than what you would normally think of as possible. Let's do just those last 4 runs, the ones that are fast, and crank up the length and make the queue depth higher as well. So we've cranked up everything to like worst case scenario. And just see what happens. Won't take very long to run that. Probably should have closed Internet Explorer, but boy, HTML5 running this, it's just not doing much. Let's convince you. Task Manager should show, even with a benchmark running, CPU pretty minimal. So Edge is using almost nothing. But nevertheless, come on, close Edge. How could I leave that running? All right, so the benchmark is running a second time, and even more incredible numbers. Well, the first one wasn't, but then it cranked up. It feels like a caching effect, right? Or priming the cache. Let's just run that again. Let's see what happens. Whoa, I don't know. There's definitely something to investigate further there, but writes of 3,000. Wow, the numbers are kind of all over the place now. All right. To really get a feel for it, I'd be wanting to run multiple VMs, throw some Linux VMs in there, more stuff. I got some more setup to do for this public presentation later in the week, but I'd say this all went pretty darn well. And that's about it for my Hyper-V video, getting started. We certainly did a little more than getting started. Yes, I'm sorry, there's always one more thing. I found an article during one of those reboots. See the red X in the bottom right? That's not it. Come on. Someone found an answer. Just right-click, disable. Whoa. Different answer. Come on. Disable and re-enable it. How crazy is that? So here we go. All right. I don't even know which one it's showing me. But if we're about to disable adapters, we kind of might want to do it here. Wouldn't you think? So, since this relies on a 5th cable for IKVM, it has nothing to do with the 4 Ethernet interfaces that the VMs or the physical servers see. Well, it's not going to be a big deal to disable. Watching the tray icon. Let's see if I double click that. I don't know. Let's just go through them, see if we get the workaround to work. So since this is unidentified network, it sure seems like, I don't know what happened there. Not sure what that pop-up window was either. Oh well, looks like I need to live with that little bug here. Alright, you just saw me shut down the VM console, but the console itself is still running. So it's pretty important to point that out. So that is it. You may want to pin Server Manager to your taskbar if you haven't already, so it's easy to get to if you accidentally close it like I just did. And again, I want to get a way to run Hyper-V Manager easily. Okay, I Googled for a way and it was rather easy to find. So we're going to get Hyper-V shortcut. And the process is a special shortcut. So let's go with desktop, new, shortcut, paste, next. Let's see if that works. Very nice. If we delete from the desktop and have it here, does it work? It does. So what's not to like about that? And if we hit Alt F4 on the desktop, we can sign out. And let's make sure it didn't have any troubles. There you have it. Sorry about my clocks being off there, but all right. So yeah, you got your dashboard. I can relaunch it because I pinned that. And then we have our new Hyper-V Manager icon, which we'll be using often. VM is still running using 0% CPU. Nice. Cloning, copying, motioning, all that stuff. I need a second host to do a lot of it too. So that'll be a deeper dive. I can do it at a later date. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you found this video helpful, and hopefully you want to see more content produced. Support Tinker Try buttons and follow buttons, as well as a weekly newsletter subscription. So thanks again for watching and for visiting tinkertry.com.